I'm going to play this clip from the Ezra Klein show because I think that this is one of those funny things where it is a period where I was right about everything. So we should sit back and enjoy it, right? We should try to be happy. I mean, we were vindicated. We were totally vindicated. We should all be smiling, right?
From New York Times Opinion, this is the Ezra Klein Show. I've been thinking about this moment on Thursday night after the first presidential debate when MSNBC's Alex Wagner interviewed Governor Gavin Newsom of California.
You were out there getting a chorus of questions about whether Biden should step down. There is panic that has set in. There is panic that has set in among people who have watched this debate, who are Democrats, people who are strategists, and some even inside Democratic campaigns. Yeah. Do you think it's unfounded?
Well, I think it's unhelpful, and I think it's unnecessary. We've got to go in and got to keep our heads high. And as I say, we've got to have the back of this president. You don't turn your back because of one performance. What kind of party does that?
What kind of party would do that? Well, maybe a party that wanted to win. A party that wanted to nominate a candidate that the American people believe is up to doing the most important, most difficult job in the world. Maybe the better question is, what kind of party right now would do nothing? In February, I argued that Joe Biden should step aside, that he shouldn't run for re-election, that Democrats should do what political parties did in presidential elections until the 1970s, choose a ticket at their convention. In public, the backlash I got from top Democrats was ferocious. I was a bedwetter living inside an Aaron Sorkin-drenched fantasy land. In private, their feedback was more tentative and thoughtful and frightened. No one tried to persuade me that Biden was a strong candidate. They argued instead that he couldn't be convinced to step aside, that even if he could be, that Vice President Kamala Harris would lose the election, that even if a convention passed over Harris, that passing her over would alienate black women. They argued not that Joe Biden was strong, but that the Democratic Party was weak, that it had no other options, that it didn't have the legitimacy or the muscle to do something else. I don't believe that. I think Democrats should give themselves a little bit more credit. Biden's presidency is proof of the Democratic Party's ability to act strategically. Biden didn't win the Democratic nomination in 2020 because he set the hearts of party activists aflame. Support for Biden always lacked the passion of support for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or even Andrew Yang. Biden won because the party made a cold decision to unite around the candidate it thought best suited to beating Donald Trump. Biden won because Democrats did what they had to do, not what they wanted to do. And it wasn't just Biden. While the Republican Party was collapsing fully into its MAGA era.
So when he says the party, he means elected officials and their allied media. They decided that they would do anything they could to stop Bernie. And why do you think there were 20 people in the race in 2020? The reason why there were 20 people in the race in 2020 is because the establishment Democrats didn't have faith in Joe Biden. Barack Obama didn't have faith in Joe Biden. He didn't think Joe Biden could take Bernie on toe to toe and win. They didn't think Joe Biden could do it. They said, never underestimate the ability of Joe Biden to fuck it up. But as the primary dragged on, none of the alternatives to Biden managed to gain ground against Bernie Sanders. There was only one candidate who was polling as well as Bernie Sanders, and that was Joe Biden. And so the Democratic Party made a cold-blooded decision to block progress for a second time. I don't know, Mike. This may be a little bit of every accusation and confession on my part. However, it just kind of feels like we're flailing, knowing that you were right. And I think everyone knows Biden isn't going to drop out. There's nothing we could do. We're strapped in on this hell ride. The systemic inertia will not allow the change we need. No one is coming to save us. A couple things I would say to that. Number one, I don't care. I don't care if we're going to lose. I don't give a shit if the human race is going to go extinct. Even if I knew that to be the case, I don't care. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to play out my hand till the end. I'm going to play out my position until I'm checkmated. I'm not resigning. I'm not giving up. One of the best things you can do in chess is never resign. Make your opponent demonstrate that they can actually carry their advantage to a checkmate. Never give up early. Because you blundered to give them the advantage, most likely. They're very likely to blunder to even the game out again. Until someone make every single person checkmate you every single time. And if you're one of those people that as soon as things start going badly, you quit, you will never get better. Good players play on. Honestly, if you're trying to improve in chess, the single best thing you could do is never resign. And my personal feeling about all this is I disagree. I think that Joe Biden is flailing. I think Joe Biden is collapsing. I think that it is very plausible that he could drop out. And quite frankly, even if he doesn't drop out, he's so old he might die. I mean, queen and king versus king is losing every time at a certain level, but I take your point. Until that person accidentally mouse slips or that person doesn't realize they put you in stalemate. Even if it only happens 1 in 500 times, that's still that is still a tie or that you didn't think you were going to get that you ended up getting. I'm not saying stay the course. I'm not saying never change anything. What I am saying is never give up. It's pointless. What are you going to do? I mean, the only reason you resign or you quit is so that you could go and start another fight where you think you're going to have a better opportunity. But the mental orientation toward competitive games, like if you're practicing and the game doesn't matter, you sure resign. But if you're playing for rating points, you're playing in a tournament, never resign. Play on.
Repeatedly choosing these wannabe Trumps who lose winnable elections. Democrats have kept choosing candidates who win tough races in challenging states, candidates suited to the races they need to run. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Tony Evers in Wisconsin, Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, Mark Kelly and Katie Hobbs in Arizona, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in Georgia. Since 2018, Democrats have been on a winning streak, and they've been on that streak because they have acted strategically, or Republicans have acted impulsively. And yet these same Democrats, they have no confidence that they could rise to the moment if Biden steps aside. I'd sometimes ask them what they thought would happen if, God forbid, in a terrible turn of events, Biden received health news that forced him to end his campaign. Would the Democratic Party collapse into the fetal position and accept Trump's ascension? No, of course not, they said. Democrats then would have no choice. They'd have to build a ticket at the convention. I always found that answer revealing. There's no lack of talent or capacity in the Democratic Party. There's a lack of coherence and confidence. What is this party for? Newsom's comments on Thursday implied an answer. The party's function is to support Joe Biden. We've got to have his back, he said. He said the criticism of Joe Biden, it was not unfounded, just unhelpful. The more astonishing statement came from Tim Walz, the Democratic governor of Minnesota, who talked to Fox News.
I think we could learn something from Republicans. Republicans will not abandon Donald Trump through indictments, through whatever it may be.
Is that a model Democrats should really want to follow? How have Republicans done since embracing Donald Trump?
Actually, if you know the Democratic Party like I do, you understand that their biggest and most fervent wish is to be the Republican Party, but not have to be looked down upon by people with morals and people with ethics. That is what the Democratic Party politician wants. They hate their base. This is one of my many axioms. One of Mike's homespun axioms. Democrats hate their base. Republicans fear theirs. When you understand that, when you fully and completely understand it, and then you understand why the Democrats are doing what they're doing, because they hate you. They don't want you to be their base. They want the Republicans to be their base. And that is what the Democrats have been doing for 35 years, trying to get the upper middle class, white suburban family to vote Democrat. That has been their entire goal. They don't want you poor people asking them for shit. They don't want you telling them they need to pay taxes on their ill-gotten gains. Isn't this a Hassan axiom? No. In fact, it's a homespun axiom of democratic progressivism for a long time. But I'm the one who started saying it on Twitch. Maybe Hassan also started saying it because I said it at him so many times in the chat. Is there like, what is the website for Hassan chat logs? Does anybody know?
Trump. Republicans lost in 2018. They lost in 2020. They underperformed badly in 2022. And rather than changing course, they've doubled down. In March, Laura Trump was elected co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She is, from any traditional party perspective, completely unqualified for the job. But if you view the RNC as a vehicle for simply the ambitions and whims of Donald Trump, her father-in-law, then she is completely qualified. She is loyal to nothing and no one in the party save Trump. She is crystal clear on the role the RNC should play.
Every single penny will go to the number one and the only job of the RNC. That is electing Donald J. Trump as president of the United States and saving this country. We have no time to waste.
So look, I think this has been a disaster for Republicans. I think the only reason they might lose in 2024 is they nominated Trump again. If they nominated Nikki Haley, I don't think there'd be anything Democrats could do right now. But this goes beyond any one election. This is a corruption of the very concept of a political party. In their great book, The Hollow Parties, Sam Rosenfeld and Dana Schlossman tell the history of how the strong parties of yesterday became the hollowed-out vehicles for individual presidential ambition we see today. The ethos of the early American political parties was that they were a bulwark against politics becoming about one person at a time when Americans feared a return to that. The idea, Rosenfeld told me, was, quote, that parties subsume individual ambition, that you commit to the party and to the cause, never to the man. Did parties live up to this perfectly always? No, of course not. But they did live up to it imperfectly. They did live up to it at key moments. Famously, it was a delegation of Republican members of Congress who persuaded President Richard Nixon to resign. There is more to the Republican Party than Richard Nixon's ambitions. There is not more to the Republican Party today than Donald Trump's ambitions. But I would have told you that the Democratic Party is different, that it is not just a vehicle for Joe Biden's ambitions. Right now, I'm not so sure. The best case against replacing Biden is that doing so at this late hour is riskier than keeping him. But that is a choice the Democratic Party made and has kept making. It was a choice to support Biden in running for re-election, despite poll after poll showing supermajorities of the American people thought he was too old for a second term. It was a choice, if from a career perspective an understandable one, for 0 major Democrats to run against him in a primary, even as polls showed majorities of Democratic voters did not want Biden to run again. It was a choice if top Democrats in the White House believe Vice President Harris was too weak to run or govern in Joe Biden's place, to do nothing about it, to leave the ticket unchanged. Democrats have spent years now choosing to do nothing to solve the most obvious problems they faced in 2024. And now the argument they make is that there is nothing they can do. It's too late. Now, to even admit these problems is unhelpful. Even if top Democrats did believe Biden should be replaced, they face a collective action problem. It doesn't serve the interests of any of them individually to try to nudge Biden out of the race. Imagine you're Gavin Newsom or you're Gretchen Whitmer. You want to run in 2028. If Biden drops out, you want to be considered in 2024. Is the best strategy for you to try to push Biden out of the race publicly? Or is it to be the most loyal of loyal soldiers so that if Biden does leave or does lose, you have a strong bond with his donors, with his team, with his supporters? And who wants to be the member of Biden's inner circle who goes to him and says, you got to stop this. You're not up to this anymore. It's not a good idea. What happens to your role in the White House the day after that conversation? The other argument Democrats have made is that Biden...
I mean, he's totally right. Like, as I said to Hassan the other day, the iron law of institution. This is what I said. Is it like I literally said this? You see. Let me see if I can find it. Iron. This log doesn't work. This log is okay. Maybe I said it last month. Ah, here it is. I found it. Okay. The problem is the iron law of institutions. Every person who isn't paid to be a Democrat at the DNC or White House is panicking, but the people inside the party caring more about their own position. And that position requires Biden stay the candidate. They'd rather roll the dice with him and maybe keep their jobs than definitely lose them. That's the way these fucking scum think. And when I first encountered this shit, when I was very young, when I was 29 and I was getting involved in the party and I was running for a representative seat, and I was like, well, if we should do this, this, and this. These guys seem vulnerable. This seems like a good strategy. This seems like, no, we can't do that. Huh? Why? Well, we don't want to piss off that Republican member. My face was like, what? What? The Democratic Party is a completely and totally controlled opposition of the Republican Party. It is a Washington Generals to the Republicans Globetrotters. It's intended to lose. Electric Will, CBDB, thank you both for the tier 1. It's there as a safety valve for the capitalist system. The Republicans, they enact the policies. The Democrats, they discharge the built-up contradictions. That is the purpose. If you don't understand that, if you think I'm not serious, you haven't done 1% of what I've done in politics. I remember one time I had gotten a poll for a candidate I was working for. He was in a district that I thought for sure should have a Democrat representing it, but it had a Republican representing it, who was the chair of the Appropriations Committee and the Pennsylvania Senate. Now, if you don't know who that is, it's fine. You can probably figure it out with a little bit of research. But the Appropriations Chair is the person who writes the budget. They have a large staff. They're very powerful in Harrisburg. They get a lot of lobbyists. They have a lot of lobbyists attention. But his district shouldn't have been represented by a Republican. And I was like, why the fuck aren't the Democrats going after this district? So I got a candidate. He was a small business owner, veteran, progressive, entrepreneur, believed in Medicare for all, was very strong on abortion rights, was a local elected official, was normal, was married, had kids and a dog, owned his own home. You know, very normal, accomplished guy, but progressive, left wing. The perfect candidate for this district. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from small dollar donors. We got national Democratic groups to support him because they saw what I saw. This is a grand opportunity to flip the seat. But the better I did, the more volunteers I recruited, the more money I raised. I couldn't get the Democratic Party to get behind this candidate. And I just didn't get it. I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is 2018, chat. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why isn't the Democratic Party resisting? And what I found out was that Democratic senators were taking my internal campaign information that I provided to the party and handing it to the Republicans. There was 100%, anything I gave to the Democratic Party was immediately handed to the Republicans. This is not conjecture. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a confirmed fact. Then, so my candidate and his wife were clinic escorts. Now, if you don't know what that is, I'll explain it. In Planned Parenthood, one of the things that people that really believe in abortion can do to support the movement is basically wait outside of abortion clinics and escort women who are or other people that are getting reproductive health care into the clinic to protect them from far-right counter-protesters who are often outside abortion clinics. So a clinic escort and donor to Planned Parenthood for 12 years. That's who the candidate was, right? I met with the president of Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania. They were excited about our race, about how organized it, by the polling data we had, by the money we're raising, the district we were in. And then we went from, and we turned in a questionnaire to Planned Parenthood and abortion rights activists that it was a 100% pro-abortion questionnaire. So you had somebody who was a longtime Planned Parenthood donor, clinic escort, turned in a perfect questionnaire, interviewed with the head of Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania, and we didn't get endorsed by Planned Parenthood. No endorsement. The opponent was pro-life. We did not get endorsed by Planned Parenthood. Barack Obama went around and started endorsing all sorts of state legislative candidates as a way of helping them out. He did not endorse my candidate. I was baffled. I couldn't understand it. But then I realized, oh, he's an actual progressive. Oh, he's not from the Democratic machine. He came up on his own as a local elected official. We built this. I built this movement with a few other people. We had a groundswell of Democratic support. We had money because we raised it. We had volunteers because we recruited them. We did everything outside the party, and the party didn't want that. So they tried to defeat me. The cherry on top. At this point, I was pissed off because 2018 was a good year for Democrats. And I was like, they should be expanding the map. Why? And by the way, to this day, the Democrats do not have the Senate in Pennsylvania. And it's because this race is one of the most important reasons why. I was like, what the fuck? Why aren't the Democrats going for this district? I don't understand it. It's because they don't want it. They didn't want power. They would rather lose and have a Republican stay in than have an actual grassroots progressive challenge a Republican official and win, and a high-ranking Republican and win. And I learned it, and then the final humiliation, and this is when I really hate it. This is where I learned to hate the Democratic Party with every fiber of my being. My candidate believed in Medicare for all, and he supported the idea of trying to put together a single payer pilot program for Pennsylvania. But he was also part of the larger single payer movement in the country. There was this movement of business owners who support single payer because American healthcare expenses are so out of control. It makes American businesses non-competitive in the world stage because business owners have to pay so much for health insurance that it massively increases the cost of labor here. It's like the capitalists that are pro single payer. And you know what they made me do? What the Democratic Party made me do? Sit down with a lobbyist from America's healthcare plans. If you don't know what America's healthcare plans are, here, let me see if I can find a example of that.
It's been a time for family, a time to be careful, a time to consider our choices, especially our healthcare choices. Some have proposed an idea called the public option. They make it sound great, but here's what they don't tell you. Your taxes would pay for a public option, one that would become this country's third largest government program. Instead, let's let private coverage, Medicare and Medicaid work together to deliver the access all Americans deserve.
Every American wants health care they can afford and trust. The public option does the opposite. It's government-controlled health insurance, a one-size-fits-all approach that could raise our payroll taxes by $2,300 and become the third largest government program. Americans want more health care choices and lower costs, and for private coverage to work together with Medicare and Medicaid. Let's build on what's working, not start over.
And then, on top of all of it, then the candidate who I was running against just started sending ads saying that my candidate didn't pay their taxes. They just started spending millions of dollars on ads saying they didn't pay their taxes. It was totally made up. He did pay his taxes. He had all the evidence that he paid his taxes. And in fact, a couple days before the election, the opponent withdrew their ads, stopped broadcasting them after we sued for defamation. And we got the Secretary of Revenue of Pennsylvania to confirm that he did in fact pay all of his taxes. And that it was all wrong and made up. But guess what? You're allowed to lie about people with millions of dollars. And if you don't have millions of dollars to fight back, too fucking bad. And you know what ended up happening, chat? You know what ended up happening? Oh well. Oh well. He eked it out. Tight race, surprisingly tight, the local media said, who had done everything they had to. The supposed left-wing media had done everything they can to endorse, support, run positive stories just before the election. Oh! He ekes out that tight win. Ekes it out. Wow. No other Republican or Democratic lawmaker from the Lehigh Valley comes close to matching Brown's power and influence, but on Tuesday night, voters almost stopped believing in him. The surprisingly close race shocked the Valley's political establishment. But no one except Pinsley gave Pinsley much of a shot, especially Brown, who even had the backing of some Democrats. That's exactly. So I saw it first fucking hand. What it was like when you had all the evidence in the world, you had a groundswell. The Democratic Party leaked my information, stole the information, aided, abetted, and tried to ensure that the Republican won the seat, and they managed to pull it off barely. And that's when I was like, oh, the Democratic Party is actually 100% controlled opposition. I know it from the inside. And why did I know it from the inside? Because I was so successful at organizing that they couldn't ignore me completely. That would be the bad strategy. So they had to draw me in to continually put like little carrots and little crumbs around, like, oh, well, if you do this and this happens, then we might help you. We might endorse you. We might promote. We might do this, this, and this. But actually, behind the scenes, they were telling unions, don't endorse that candidate. He doesn't have a chance. Telling Planned Parenthood, you better not endorse that candidate. So it didn't matter how good of a person, how upright, how good of a campaign they ran. It didn't matter. They wanted the Republican to win, and they made it happen. Because they would rather Republicans win and keep power than having grassroots progressives challenge the Democratic machine. Joe Biden, and why did I go down this long fucking rabbit hole rant about my own backstory? Because the people in the positions of power in the Democratic Party are corrupt. They are oriented toward donors who are the same donors that fund the Republican Party. They don't want grassroots progressivism. They don't want the Democrats because, you know why? Progressive Democrats might stop the super PACs. Progressive Democrats might get public finance campaigns. And you know what the thing about public finance campaigns? You can't make that much money off of those. You know what you can make a lot of money off of? Buying television ads for somebody. After somebody pours millions and millions and millions of dollars into your campaign. Oh, wow. We spent $10 million on TV ads. Well, I get to take 5 to 10% of that. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. That is literally what it's about. That small scale venal corruption is more important to these people than helping millions. The Democratic Party is a cesspit. It makes the Republican Party look absolutely moral. The one thing I'll say about the Republican Party is they deliver what their base wants. Exactly how many articles have we gotten from post-debate about Biden administration having to reassure donors? So many, because that's who they really care about. They really care about donors, not voters, not what right from wrong, not humanity, not their legacy, but donors and their access to the money. The party doesn't want to win. And if you want a feeling for how right I've been, we haven't really talked about the Supreme Court decision yet, and we will. But I just want to talk to you about this. Search me pack the court. Look how many posts I have about packing the court. I saw, Sam Cedar said something about how we don't take the court seriously. Right? We're to blame because we don't take the court seriously. You know who don't take the court seriously? Dick Durbin. That's the senator. The Senate Judiciary Committee Chair. Dick Durbin doesn't take the Supreme Court seriously. Not voters. Look at how much I've posted pack the court. This is pack the court. Search Mike from PA pack the court. Are you fucking kidding? Look how many posts there are. It's almost like I understood that this is the only way. Let's just pull one random post out of here. There hasn't been a majority of Democratic appointed justices on the Supreme Court since 1969. Isn't that enough evidence that they don't know what the hell they're doing? And yet that they have the gall to tell you to shut up and sit down when your rights are stripped away. I mean, Biden won't even say that the Supreme Court is a lawless court, so there is almost no liberal resistance. He truly is the worst possible man for this moment. Almost any other Dem running in 2020 would have been better. That was January of this year. Here's what I said on March 25th, 2021. The Democrats had just confirmed their win in Georgia. They had taken that trifecta. They held the Senate. They held the White House. They held the presidency. I said, Brian Kemp signs 95-page Georgia GOP voter suppression bill allowing GOP takeover of state county election boards, unlimited challenges to voter eligibility, restricting drop boxes, and making it a crime to give voters food and water in line. It will be challenged in court. It didn't win. This will be upheld by the 6-3 by the conservative Supreme Court. 2 of those seats stolen by Mitch McConnell. The only hope of preserving any element of American democracy is passing H.R. 1 of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and needs to be done immediately. They didn't do either. Can the court survive this stench? Some liberal wrote. I said, the Supreme Court will survive because the Democratic Party would defend institutions no matter how corrupted or compromised. It's their entire purpose as a political party right now, to try to diffuse any energy for progressive change. Here's what I wrote on September 1st of 2021. Complaining about Bernie busters in 2016 or Green Party voters in 2000 is absolutely wrong. The Democratic Party right now has the power to increase the size of the Supreme Court and protect abortion rights directly. That's who deserves the blame. Why won't the Dems act? They didn't act. Here's what I wrote on November 5th of 2023. As a double hater, I have a suggestion. He should drop out. He should be replaced by a candidate who will oppose Israel's genocide, support actual court reform to unpack the Supreme Court, and will actually promise real policy outcomes that young people demand. Good luck. Man, I wonder if I had been listened to. Here's me replying to Hutch. Republicans won the House and stole a Supreme Court seat in order to pack the court with a far-right justices openly taking bribes while they eviscerate super precedents and strip fundamental rights. Trump is leading Biden in many polls head-to-head. It's almost like I called this. The main issue is that Biden steadfastly refuses to seriously address the fact that Republican constitutional hardball has won them an unassailable activist majority on the Supreme Court. He refuses to advocate for the measures necessary to either reform or pack the court. The funniest shit is moderates threatening to expand it to 11 judges. That would mean a 6-3 conservative court will become a 6-5 conservative court. Even in their fantasies, centrists lose. Okay, that is pretty funny. What is unpack? Unpack means pack. That's just me doing spin. Because the Republicans stole a seat from Obama, and then they stole from a seat from Obama because they said you can't appoint any judges in an election year. And then, like 2 weeks before the election, they appointed Amy Coney Barrett. They said, fuck you. We were going to appoint somebody in the election year. So, like, they have 2 seats they literally stole. So the Democrats should appoint 4 seats. The oldest Scottish justice in history was Oliver Wendell Holmes, 90. It's sexist for people to demand that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, now 87, retire and take away that record from a woman. She didn't retire in 2014 when the Dems had the White House and Senate. Why should she retire if Biden wins? That was me laughing. That was me predicting that she's gonna die, and then she died. Mike was right again. Again, like, what you'll see is, like, even my biggest and most prescient posts get like 50 likes. Like, the smarter it is, the less people appreciate it. That's one of the funnier things I've found in my life as well. The more correct you are, the less people care. The dumber you are, the more likes you get. Here's what I wrote on January 10th of 2021, 4 days after January 6th, 10 days before Biden was sworn in. If the Democrats were serious about protecting democracy, they would be talking about adding justices to the Supreme Court, adding DC and Puerto Rico as states to counter the undemocratic partisan tilt of the Senate, and passing an election reform law that banned partisan gerrymandering. The Democrats not only didn't do any of that, they didn't even talk about it. Like, do you see what I mean, chat? Like, I'm going to retweet this because it's actually, it shows I had a very practical program that the Democrats had the power to do, and it wasn't even talked about. If the shoe was on the other foot, the Republicans would have done it January 21st. If there was a state, if there was a American territory with 5 million Republicans on it, it would be a state. If the Washington, D.C. voted 90% with the Republicans, it would be a state. Does anybody doubt that? Does anybody doubt that? And if the answer is you don't, then why aren't the Democrats doing it? Because they don't want to win. So weird that the Supreme Court could decide the Colorado ballot case so fast, but immunity case not so much. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. By the way, LOL, you fucking moron. Hey, moron. Hey, dipshit. They decided the immunity case. How do you feel now, dummy? How do you feel now, dummy? They decided it. How do you feel now, you stupid piece of shit? My reply was, posts like this are funny because they never take the next logical step. The Supreme Court is biased and an active political agent of the Republican Party. Now what? Biden isn't proposing any solution to this problem, just a vague gesture toward voting. That's not enough. And by the way, if anybody says Gretchen Whitmer around me, I'm going to slap him across the face. Well, chat, here's Joe Biden's speech. Are you ready? We're not going to speed it up. We're going to listen to it in every excruciating minute.
Good evening. The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that can test your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation. Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. We all saw it with our own eyes. We sat there and watched it happen that day. Attack on the police, the ransacking of the Capitol, a mob literally hunting down the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America. Now the man who sent that mob to the U.S. Capitol is facing potential criminal conviction for what happened that day. And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election. The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation. So now the American people have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land.
They
The
don't
American
care.
people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable.
They don't care.
Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it. You know, at the outset of our nation, it was the character of George Washington, our first president, that defined the presidency. He believed power was limited, not absolute, and that power always resides with the people, always. Now, over 200 years later, with today's Supreme Court decision, once again, it'll depend on the character of the men and women who hold that presidency that are going to define the limits of the power of the presidency, because the law will no longer do it. I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years, but any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent. May God bless you all, and may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you. And may God protect our children.
Will you drop out of the race? Why is the best Democrat to beat Trump? What makes you so confident you should be the president?
It takes no questions. Imagine having a disastrous debate performance, and then instead of coming out in front of the media and showing them how capable you are, you run away without answering a fucking question and without a single policy. And what did that speech say? Absolutely nothing.
The 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China is currently taking place, and Dongsheng will be publishing a series of videos in order to better understand this political event. China is at the center of the world's economy and geopolitics. However, little is known about its internal politics. So what is China's...
Honestly, I would say that if it wasn't for the People's Liberation Army, I would think that the human race was finished. That's the only institution that exists that makes me think we have a shot. Literally. Without China building up the strongest fucking military they can as fast as they can, the human race is going to go extinct. I urge President Xi to invest as much as they need in modernization of their military, in developing as many chip fab plants as they can within China. And don't worry, they're going to be fine, chat. Like, China is leading in most of the strategic production in the world. Like, for example, if we got into a war with China, and say, for example, we let's say that American Navy sunk 2 ships for every one the Chinese Navy sunk. Within 18 months, there wouldn't be any American ships left, and the Chinese would just be pumping them out. We don't have the people to build ships. We don't have the institutions. We don't have the shipyards. We don't have the steel mills. It would be Jover. It would be just like when Imperial Japan fought the United States. Sure, maybe the United States would go in and sink a bunch of Chinese ships early in the war, just like Japan did. But over the long run, they're the sleeping giant now. We're the fascist crumbling empire. Why would China plan to ever deploy the PLA? They have said they don't want to export socialism. They have said they don't want to be imperialist and force their way of life on others. They want other countries to naturally develop, and they want to engage productively with other countries because they don't believe that going around the world and trying to install puppets is a good way of interacting with the rest of the world. Because they don't want to make the same mistakes the Soviet Union did, which is get involved in, for example, wars in Afghanistan that end up draining the treasury and the legitimacy of the polity. They learn from history, which is why they're going to beat our ass. I don't want to see an all-out world war. I don't want to see a world war. That's exactly the point of why the PLA needs to be as powerful as possible to deter the United States. Can we ban the pet if they're annoying you? Sure.
Yes, he's lost a step on the campaign trail, but his capacity to govern is unaffected. The problem here is superficial, amplified by people in the media like me. You could hear this in Biden's speech the day after the debate.
Let me close with this. I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know.
By the way, I listened to the speech, and he was terrible. He sounded like shit. I'm sorry if you got a clip or two out of it where he did look like he sounded like shit. But nobody watched that speech. A lot of people watched the debate. By the way, the ratings for the debate were actually kind of low compared to previous debates. I think there were 10 million people less than the previous presidential debate because it was on cable. So a lot of people still, to this day, don't have cable. So I think like 50 million people watched it, which was good for CNN, right? But as far as presidential debates go that were usually held on all the networks at once, it's dog shit. Biden staffers. Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Well, I don't, folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done.
That speech calmed some Democratic nerves. He was louder, clearer, feistier, closer to the Biden of the State of the Union than the Biden of the debate. I kept seeing Democrats on social media say, "Where was this guy last night? Where did he go?" Come on. We all know it is easier to read off a teleprompter next to a cheering crowd than to manage the chaotic, unexpected demands of a debate. You cannot say the Biden of the teleprompter is a true Biden, but the Biden of, say, this debate answer, and I could have picked plenty of others, is not.
For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers. They've raised $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
You don't have to believe Biden is senile to believe he is diminished by age, as we all will be. I worry about the fact that Biden's worst moments come when he is unscripted, like the debate, or when he stopped to answer questions after his press conference rebutting the special counsel's report and mixed up Mexico and Egypt. This is not the president I want in a complex, high-stakes dialogue with Benjamin Netanyahu or Xi Jinping. Biden's campaign could show us these are flukes, that the president is actually fast and convincing on his feet. There's no end of adversarial podcasts and TV shows and interviews they could have him do. In polls, Biden is losing badly among voters who get their news from social media and YouTube. Why not sit for a long interview with Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan or Charlemagne the God? Why didn't Biden do the Super Bowl interview? Biden sits for fewer interviews than any recent president, and they tend to choose softball interviews.
Not only that, he's actually incredibly lazy. He does he does less things than every other president. Like, I thought Donald Trump was lazy, but I was compared to Joe Biden, he's an absolute dynamo. Like, Joe Biden literally just stays in his house in Delaware for 4 days out of the week. He takes like pretty much all of Monday and all of Friday traveling to Delaware, which is a 2.5 hour drive. Except he's the president of the United States, which means he can helicopter there. So he helicopters himself a 15-minute drive from his house in Delaware, and then he goes there. That's all he does, literally. And then he'll do maybe 1 or 2 events during the week. 1 or 2 events during the entire week. He doesn't get his morning brief till 10 a.m. And if you're the president of the United States, do you think you have to wake up a lot earlier than the fucking morning brief? You wake up, you take a shit, they're giving you the brief as you're taking a shit. You're the fucking president. He's lazier than a streamer. Like, he's literally lazier than a fucking streamer.
He gives fewer press conferences than any recent president. The idea this is all just coincidence, that none of it reflects capacity, it's not plausible. Not anymore.
And by the way, Chad, I haven't talked about Israel for a few days, but because this is more important. Like, honestly, like, if you want to end the genocide in Gaza, we need to get rid of Joe Biden. It's not that by the way, I misspoke. It's not that the genocide isn't important. This is more important to end the genocide, because the crimes that I could be talking about in Israel are so disgusting, it turns my fucking stomach, and I'm tired of looking at it. The evidence about mass rapes happening in Israeli prisons is irrefutable, unlike the made-up rapes that the New York Times made front-page articles about. Joe Biden is absolutely, without a doubt, the worst president of my lifetime. There is no comparison. Anybody who disagrees is a fucking dope.
I've heard some Democrats point to John Fetterman, who suffered a debilitating stroke during a Senate campaign in Pennsylvania, as a kind of grim model here. Fetterman also turned in a bad debate performance, but he won his seat anyway. But Fetterman was recovering from a stroke. It was reasonable to expect his capacities to return, as indeed they have. Biden is not going to age in reverse.
By the way, first of all, the John Fetterman thing is, it was probably good for him because he could hide behind the stroke instead of answering tough questions. If it had come out that he was going to throw away his progressive bona fides to kiss Biden's ass, he probably wouldn't have won. Yeah, the 927 mag on the prisoner torture is unbelievable. Inshallah. Inshallah.
So let me return to this question. What do political parties do? What are they for? One thing they do, perhaps the most important thing they do, is to nominate candidates. We have a two-party political system. Voters will have two viable choices in November. The Democratic Party is responsible for one of those choices. It needs to make that choice responsibly. What is its job, if not that? But rather than the party acting as a check on Biden's decisions and ambitions, it has become an enabler of them, an enforcer of them. It is giving the American people a choice they do not want, and then threatening them with the end of democracy if they do not take it. Democrats like to say that democracy is on the ballot, but it isn't. Joe Biden is on the ballot. There are plenty of voters who might want to vote for democracy, but do not want to vote for Joe Biden. That's why we see Democratic Senate candidates running well ahead of him in key states. Biden likes to say, compare me to the alternative, not to the almighty. And yes, Biden is far preferable to Trump, one of the most dangerous men to ever occupy the White House. But that is not the alternative to Joe Biden, not right now. The alternative to Joe Biden on that ballot line that is supposed to represent democracy is Kamala Harris or Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom or Jared Polis, Raphael Warnock, Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Gina Raimondo, Josh Shapiro, Chris Murphy, and on and on. How does Biden compare to them, really? Biden and his allies say not to look at the man, look at his record. Look at all that he has accomplished. Look at the unemployment rate, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And Biden deserves credit, real credit, just as
If you think that, and I think actually one of the things that makes it a crisis is that people are starting to believe their own bullshit. Like when you're arguing against Trump and and you're like, well, he's done some good things like the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. He's invested a lot in climate change, more than any other president. Like when you start believing that propaganda is actually a good presidency, that's where we're in a crisis. That's why we're in a crisis. Joe Biden. What were the major issues going into Joe Biden's presidency? Let's talk about the major issues that are before Joe Biden was sworn in. Let's go through them. Climate change. Have we substantially bent the curve? And are we on the path to net zero and keeping us below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels? The answer is no. Okay, what about housing? How's housing crisis going? Oh, wait, it's the most unaffordable it's ever been in my entire life. As a 40-year-old man, it's never been worse to buy a house than right now. So, okay, he hasn't solved that problem. Student debt, how's that going? Oh, all his stuff was blocked by the far-right Supreme Court. Speaking of the far-right Supreme Court, how are we doing with the far-right Supreme Court? Oh, wait, Sonia Sotomayor refuses to retire, and the 6-3 Republican Supreme Court is gutting every policy of the New Deal and Warren Court. They're coming for gay marriage. They're coming for abortion. They're coming for God knows what else. Miranda rights got gutted as well. Like they've come for everything. We have a Cat 5 hurricane barreling towards Texas and Louisiana right now. Category 5 hurricane. If you're in the Gulf, good luck. Joe Biden is doing a genocide. Obviously the Palestinian issue has been far worse. So go down the issues. Our democracy, gerrymandering. Republicans took the House because of gerrymandering and the centrist Democrats of New York not drawing a map. So gerrymandering is unobstructed. Climate change is out of control. I mean, what are we doing? What has he actually... He hasn't gotten a single thing done. He hasn't actually... But God damn it, the opioid crisis is at its worst stage ever. It's now metastasized to fentanyl, synthetic opioid everywhere, which is far more dangerous than heroin ever was. Congratulations, Joe. He hasn't solved a single goddamn issue. Not one. And if you pretend like he's a successful president, then you should not be surprised when you lose, because every reasonable person looks at the situation and says, hey, the country is a lot worse off than it was 4 years ago, and the Democrats are pretending like it's better. That's insane.
Hi everybody, I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna Oi.
Okay, guys, we're not going to get into this rabbit hole. We're ranting about something else right now.
Does all presidents get credit for what happens on their watch? He has been, in my view, a good president. But let's not be naive. He didn't write the Inflation Reduction Act by hand with a fountain pen. The IRA and every other bill passed under Biden's tenure was written and passed by members of Congress. Those votes were organized by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries and their teams. Biden's White House staff, his policy advisors, and his foreign policy team, they are Democrats and staffers who would serve in another administration too. The cabinet members implementing those bills, they are Democrats. Some of these people are possible presidential candidates. The president is important. Joe Biden is important, but he is not alone. He is not irreplaceable. He is part of a party. I'm not going to end this by pretending that there is some easy path forward for Democrats, some surefire way to win in 2024. No path now is without profound risk. An open convention, it's risky. Kamala Harris is risky. To run an 81-year-old with a 38% approval rating who just got trounced in the first debate, it is risky. Biden was losing before the debate, and he is yet likelier to lose after it. To the extent his team has articulated a theory of what was supposed to turn the election around, that was it. The unusually early June debate, which they asked for, where the American people would see...
You think he was worse than W? I absolutely think Joe Biden was worse than W. Because I can look at the genocide in Gaza and realize that what's happening in the Middle East is spinning far more out of control than even the Iraq invasion. And you're in some sort of Delulu fucking world where that's not happening because you don't want it to happen. The Ukraine war is far worse than how Bush handled Georgia. You know, when Russia took Abkhazia and South Ossetia and nobody fucking cared, the world fucking yawned. That was the right reaction. Instead of launching into a devastating war. See, Georgia still exists as a country. Ukraine is being ripped apart, you stupid fuck. You want to go over more? George W. Bush passed the Medicare prescription drug benefit, which is bigger than anything Biden did. Oops. George W. Bush raised the minimum wage. Oops. Biden never did. Oops. You want to go down the list? He's worse than fucking Bush. Like, that's how bad he is. I'm sorry if you don't like to hear that, but that's fucking reality, dude. And by the way, I think George W. Bush was a disastrously bad president, but to say that Biden is better than him is comically stupid. Also, and here's the other thing, he's a Republican. He did Republican things that Republicans want to happen. You know, like, yeah, all Republicans are not just worse than all Democrats if you're fucking sane and you're actually rating the effectiveness of the man as opposed to the your policy perspectives as well. Even from the point of view of policy perspectives, Joe Biden has been a complete disaster with very little to his name, very little. And when people deny it, it's fucking embarrassing. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ. Joe Biden is one of the worst presidents we've ever had. And in the moment of, you know, fighting against the Republicans, you may want to deny that because you don't want the Republicans to win. Neither do I. I actually want progressives to win. But when you're actually talking about his real accomplishments, he's got nothing, man. He's got nothing. They didn't even pass. They didn't pass one law to protect queer people. They didn't pass the Equality Act. It was right there. They could have passed the Equality Act. People will be like, he passed gun control. The gun control didn't do anything. Have you actually looked at the law? It gave funding for states if they wanted to fund red flag laws. Well, I'll give you a hint. All blue states already had red flag laws. None of the red states wanted them. So the bill did fucking nothing. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court just pulled back a Trump-era regulation on bump stocks. So the net effect on gun control under the Biden administration has been a loosening of gun control, you dumb bastard. But hey, wait, you're not allowed to hold him accountable for what the Supreme Court is doing. Oh, wow. Is he advocating for packing the Supreme Court? Is he advocating for court reform? No, he's not. So he defends the institution of the Supreme Court as it repeals gun control legislation, as he ineffectually whines about 2016. He's a loser. So what do we do? Vote for the fascist? Why do people say things that I am not saying? You'll never convince any of us normal people that Biden is worse than W, but I respect your energy. The point is that I think people need to stop the idea in their head that Biden is a good president. Needs to stop. He was a bad president, guys. If you think Biden is a good president, you're part of the problem. Legitimately, you are part of the problem. He's a bad president. He has been ineffective in every fucking way. Now this channel is pro-Trump? No. Are you fucking stupid? What's going on with you? This is my 48-7-month sub brain rot. What are you confused about? What are you confused about? Biden is a bad president. So is George W. Bush. What are you confused about? I'm not saying vote for Trump. Trump is a bad president too. What I'm saying is we need to be honest about these people for the fucking change. He's a dumb bastard. What do I want to do? I want Joe Biden to drop the fuck out. You know what I would do? I would have Sotomayor retire from the Supreme Court. I would appoint Kamala Harris to the Supreme Court. Effective date, January 20th, 2021. Or, excuse me, 2025. So, in other words, she would stay in the vice presidency all the way till Inauguration Day, in which case she would assume the, right, just before the new presidential term, she would be sworn in to the Supreme Court. Then I would have a national Democrat straw poll paid for by the $200 fucking million Joe Biden has rotting in his bank account. And we have an election for president to replace him. And then at the convention, we nominate whoever wins that straw poll. Get Biden, get Harris out of there and open this thing up. It is 100 and what? Like 20 days until the election. We have plenty of time. The election in the UK was 44 days long. We can handle it. We can handle doing it in 3 times the time. It comes down to people stop needing to be eating the fucking political slop that is fed to us. The material change we all need will not happen because both parties are owned by the capitalist class. Do you want your bombs dropped with a pride flag printed on them or with racial slurs? Dems are fucking racist too, mind you. Get your heads out of your ass, organize and demand real change. Absolutely correct. That's what I suggest. Now, everybody's hearing this will go, wow, those are all incredibly intelligent ideas. The person would have Democratic legitimacy because of the straw poll. We would probably pick someone at least decently well known. Kamala Harris wouldn't just be humiliated. She would be given a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. She would be the first, South Indian American appointed to the Supreme Court. So it would be a diversity win. She wouldn't be humiliated by being passed over because she would be elevated to the Supreme Court, which she would be on for decades to come. Look at that. Wow. I just solved everybody's problem, and it didn't take much fucking thought. Now, here's the thing. I said all this because I wanted to point something out. When people say, well, what would you do? I legitimately feel sorry for you. I legitimately feel sorry for you because I don't know what it's like to have a stupid brain, and I feel bad for you because you're asking that question, and I legitimately think you can't come up with stuff. Like, you're not capable of it coming up with ideas like I just did. And you're kind of like yelling at me because you're dumb. And it's like, I'm sorry you're dumb, but anybody, like a group of relatively intelligent people could come up with a variety of methods to navigate all these issues. Like, people are not asking, like, and then when I say this, they'll go like, well, you don't have any power, so it's not going to happen. And it's like, okay, why did you ask me? Why did you ask me for a solution? I give you a solution, and then you're like, well, you don't have any power to have that solution happen. It's like, oh, okay, cool. You didn't want a solution. You just wanted me to say that we have to go with Biden. By the way, for anybody who defends Biden, why do you want to have Biden? Why do you want to have Biden? He's going to lose. He's losing. And he was a bad president. I double underline, he was a bad president. It's just because they want to be combative, they don't care. Yeah, they're fucking losers, man. And everything I said about Joe Biden was right. In fact, he was worse than I thought. Biden signals to aides that he would serve only a single term. You know what I said to this, chat? You want to see another example of Mike was right? Let me see if I can find this. Hopefully I tweeted it. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. I told you at the time, I laughed at this and said what? That he's definitely going to try to run again. Biden will run. My worry is that the dark Brandon memes will create a Morbius effect where it leads Biden's campaign to think he is more popular than he actually is, motivating him to run again in 2024 when he absolutely should not. I predicted that. Remember that? Remember how the dark Brandon memes backfired, chat? That was when Morbius got re-released by Sony because people were making Morbius memes and it bombed the second time. No one else is even close. Even worse, a significant portion of leftists and Democrats have deluded themselves into thinking that the Democratic Party elites are going to do anything but coordinate Biden to run for a second term. 2021, chat. In case you want to know how much better my analysis is than everyone else, here I am again. Right again. Years in advance. Years in advance. I mean, sometimes people will come to me and be like, Mike, you thought Bernie was going to win after Nevada. That means you're an idiot. That's legitimately the only criticism I get about my predictions, which is pretty incredible. According to Social Security actuarial tables, there is a 38% chance Biden dies outright before finishing his second term. It's insane to nominate him February 8th of this year. January 3rd. These kind of posts typically signal a major shift in the electorate that won't be believed until the actual election occurs. Biden is toast, and we need him to step down before it's too late. January 3rd of this year. Here's what I wrote on July 12th of 2022. At the end of the day, Trump at least satisfied the Republican base and donor class. Biden doesn't satisfy anyone. Only dedicated Democratic partisans support him at this point. When asked, many of those people don't even want him to run. He's exactly the disaster the left feared. 38% chance of him dying before the second term ends. Not 38% chance of him dying this year, unfortunately. He's literally a coin flip to survive his second term. Like, isn't it fucking insane to nominate someone who's a coin flip not to even survive? Oh, I thought he was going to lose to Trump, but then COVID happened. So this was April 12th. I got this one wrong. I thought he was going to lose to Trump, but then COVID happened, and that changed the game. April 12th was really before everything really fucking took off. So I will say that the COVID and the COVID voter expansion surprised me. Hey, Mark A. Caputo, now that Joe Biden is ahead of the race to the nomination, it might be worth it for the sake of the country for you to burn this source and let us know who thinks Biden isn't fit to be president. Are they working on his campaign? Here's what I wrote on August 18th, 2020. If there's one thing that Bill Clinton proves, it's that no matter how horrible or despicable your crimes, the immunity of the presidency will persist well after your term. Expect to see real Donald Trump walking around as a free man no matter what Biden wins by. Just awful. Biden refuses to lead, call out his opposition. He says there are 50 presidents and sits there in the White House. He's lazy, ineffective, and weak. He's rightly despised by this country, and I hope he doesn't seek another term. 2022 to Hutch. Again, if I had been listened to, where would we be at? Where would we be? It's totally beyond over. Biden is electoral cyanide for the Democratic Party. He must be replaced before it's too late. He's not going to get numbers to shift 20 points in 10 months. It's not going to happen. Notice that Trump has numbers over 50% in almost every swing state. That was January 31st. Again, my analysis has been dead balls on accurate. Here's what I wrote on November 4th of 2020. Joe Biden is such an egomaniac that he will run for re-election. He'll get annihilated. 47 likes. Again, the polls, the posts that I make that are the most prescient get the least amount of likes. The dumbest shit where I say Morbius is the stuff that gets thousands of likes. The dumber you post, the more likes it gets. The reason why Biden does this is because Bernie is still popular with the American people, but the more Bernie is seen as an ally of Biden, the worse Bernie's approval rating will get. It's time to look for a 2024 primary challenger, January 19th, 2022. I mean, I'm just going to start reposting these. Like, just so everybody can understand. As I've been saying, it's not very it's just one of those many examples of how blatantly easy it was to see this coming. Biden's inability to pressure or in any way lead his party during the Build Back Better negotiation has presaged pretty exactly his inability to constrain Israeli war crimes. It doesn't really matter if he never wanted to, or if he's just weak and a feckless loser. Either way, he must go. May 2nd, I wrote, based on Biden's speech this morning, he must be removed from office. The speech is an open call for crackdowns on college protests. He can't be allowed to remain in office. Democratic politicians, if you don't call for him to step aside, the DNC will absolutely explode. Notice that, people don't go around, looking for all these examples. And again, all I searched was Biden will run and scrolled my posts. And every single one of them is a fucking banger. There is a 0% chance Joe Biden will do anything like this. He will personally cut the throats of every grandma on Social Security before he defies the SCOTUS decision, no matter how unjust. January of last year. What's clear is that centrists feel absolutely no fear of Joe Biden. They believe he will never retaliate against them for breaking the whip and voting against the party. Biden campaigned on working across the aisle, and he can't keep control of his own party. Pathetic. Quick question for liberals that follow me. Just how low would Biden's numbers need to get before you would call for him to drop out? Is there any number January 16th of this year? Again, 6 months ago. How low does it need to go? Is this a Mike Greatest Hit stream? No, this is just me searching Biden will run and scrolling all of my posts, and every single one of them is a fucking banger. I'm sure I'll never understand the brains of those people that want to run Biden with a 39% approval rating against Trump. Last time around, he had at least decent numbers in the matchup. Now he's underwater everywhere and is clearly in decline. February 19th of this year. Again, people were talking about it. I was talking about it because why did I say that? Because, chat, we're the freaks that actually watch Biden speeches. We know what he's actually like. James, it isn't too late to replace him. According to the Social Security actuarial tables, there's a 38% chance Biden dies outright in the next 5 years. That's pretty high. February 8th of this year. Actually, it seems like they have. Biden is incompetent and should be forced to step down. That's the only honest thing a reporter commenting on Biden's health should be saying. February 10th. Biden's liberals in complete denial of Biden's re-election chances totally collapse. It's May and Biden doesn't have a single policy on his campaign website. Never been more cooked. 36% approval rating and tied in New Hampshire. Again, the reason why centrist media figures and Democratic politicians have waited this long to tell Biden to drop out is because they were worried a progressive might win an open and fair primary. Democratic primary. Party, by the way. Hillary Clinton on the state of the Democratic Party. I think that it's a time for some careful thinking about what wins election, and not just in deep blue districts where a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, or a so-called progressive is going to win. They basically ran a Hillary Clinton clone for Maine Senate seat, and she underperformed Biden by a staggering 18%. But yes, the path to electoral victory is more centrist scum like Manchin and Sinema. How'd that work out? Neither one of them are running for re-election, by the way. Fucking pieces of shit. The main political crisis that America faces is the fact that Democrats absolutely refuse to fight back. Biden is a major voice against court reform. We have to make this politically unviable for him. Another banger. Again, every single one of my posts are bangers. I don't know what, this isn't even about my ego. This is just me being fucking frustrated because I'm not the only one saying this. All of you agree. The thousands of you who are in my chat, you pretty much all agree with me on this, I hope. January 26th. At this point, it's absolutely irresponsible to do anything but call for Biden to be replaced. There's still enough time to do it. Biden drop out. January 26th. June 1st, 2022. He could do it in 5 minutes. Biden won't even support overturning the filibuster publicly. Stop pretending that he is fighting for anything but his own re-election. Good luck with that, by the way. Nights like tonight make me realize just how much we lost when Bernie lost the primary. Joe Biden will go down in history as a failed president, even if he is lucky enough to get a second term, aiding and abetting a genocide in full view of the world. Banger. As a person who was alive and conscious of the world around me in 2009 and 2010, I regret to inform you that if Biden wins, libs are going to completely check out of politics, and there will be a ferocious backlash from the right. We'll have approximately 6 months to get anything. And guess what? We didn't get anything. There you go. There you go.
Biden and Trump on the stage and be reminded of why they feared Trump and backed Biden in 2020. That theory failed. Joe Biden couldn't pull it off. Look, I understand the risks of a convention. My argument for it politically is not that it can't go badly. It's that it has the chance of going very well. That there's some possibility Democrats would find and pick a ticket that people are authentically really excited about. Not a ticket where the theories are going to come home because they're so afraid of Donald Trump, but that in addition to being afraid of Donald Trump, they actually want these people in the White House. That is at least a possibility at a convention in a way I no longer think it is a possibility with Joe Biden atop the ticket. But I get that it could go the other way. I don't think this is an easy choice. What I think really tips it is not the politics, it's the reality. Biden is not the best choice for the presidency, not anymore. And look, I realize there is no magic mechanism, no unitary actor called the party that can convince him to step aside. Ultimately, he will decide to do that or he won't. But there are many people in the party with influence over him. There's a question of what kind of support he senses he has from the rest of the party. There's a question of what key people in the party think their role is right now. And what I'm saying is the Democratic Party, it may not end up with another choice. It may indeed be too late. But they should be trying to make another choice possible. Because there's not a plausible way for Democrats to convince voters that the man they saw on that stage on Thursday should be president 3 years, 4 years from now. I don't even think Democrats believe that. So to go back to Newsom's question, what kind of party would be trying to make a change after Thursday night? A party that was doing its job.
Joe Biden's approval rating in the most recent CNN poll is down to 36%. We're now entering terminal stage. Jesus fucking Christ, man.